Hi guys, and welcome to a new mini-series called How to Create the Perfect Plants vs Zombies game. Now, one of the things I've always loved about the PvZ franchise is that the developers have never been afraid of innovation and change. This is what Plants vs Zombies is based on. Popcap took the typical tower defense game, changed the format by using the 5 lanes layout, and adding a unique twist of putting garden plants up against hordes of the undead. Although, as with all changes, not all of them are necessarily going to be positive. So what I'm going to be doing throughout this series is going through every Plants vs Zombies game individually and discussing two aspects of the game that were done brilliantly and therefore something that should be carried through into the next game, whatever that might be, and one thing about each game that was not so good and should be sent to the scrap heap. As usual, just before we begin, remember to hit those like and subscribe buttons if you enjoy the content on this channel and want to help it grow. Anyway, let's get started. So we're going to start off with the original Plants vs Zombies, where it all began, where Zombie on Your Lawn was born. Now, the first positive I want to discuss is replayability, as I think this is where the original game really shines, keeping the player wanting to come back for more, and is still managing to do that over a decade later. So the original adventure mode can be completed quite quickly. I'd probably say it'll take you no more than 6 or 7 hours, even if you take your time and potentially fail a few rounds. However, once that is completed, this is where the original Plants vs Zombies immediately sucks you back in, as you can replay the adventure mode. But it's not just a simple replay. Suddenly the rounds are much harder and longer, even in the first stage, but you also have some fun and creative new restrictions or objectives you have to complete. For example, Dave will give you a set of plants you must use, or just a single plant that takes up one of your spots. But how does this fit into creating the perfect Plants vs Zombies game? Well, I think the lesson here is that replayability doesn't necessarily have to be complex or completely repetitive. It just has to be creative, surprising, and most importantly, fun. I think the best example to show how the original Plants vs Zombies level of replayability could have been reintroduced is the free roam regions in Battle for Neighborville. Now, throughout the PvE areas, there are a number of bounty activities you can go around and complete. However, once the bounty is completed, that's it. Yes, you can replay the activity, however, it's just the exact same, which is great to some extent. You can challenge yourself to try and complete it as fast as possible, for example, but this can become grindy very quickly. So what if instead of endlessly playing the exact same activity, the activities had different tiers, where once you have completed the bounty the first time around, the second time you play it, it is different. Not necessarily harder, but creatively different. Perhaps the challenge now had to be done, but you had no access to your abilities, or the enemies you have to eliminate suddenly hide and you have to go and find them. Just something that would add another layer of replayability, something to bring you back to those areas. A great example of this being done well can be seen in Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, where the developers have introduced what they are calling an inverted mode, which essentially allows you to replay any level in the game but with some new and creative twists. The second positive I want to discuss is minigames. So, as well as being able to repeat the adventure mode with more obstacles and challenges, you also have access to a number of minigames that aren't just reiterations of what we have seen previously. They take the mechanics the player has learned from the base game and turn it into something that challenges the player, makes them think on their feet, and perhaps even do the opposite of what they've been taught to do up until this point. Now, you might think this links back to replayability, and to some extent yes it does, but when it comes to the mini games, these are little experiences that are actually considerably different to what you experience elsewhere in the game. Whack-a-Zombie is a great example of this. The mode is still in the world of Plants vs Zombies, but the mechanics are different to the regular gameplay loop. But imagine if in some of the shooter games, if there was a game mode where you could play Plants vs Zombies pinball, or another one that I've heard people suggest is being able to play the original Plants vs Zombies through one of the arcade machines. Now, I think the closest we have got to these mini-games are the crazy settings you can use in private play. Now, these really allow you to spice up your game. I guess they kind of work like cheats back in like the days of PS1 games, but I think going off what the original Plants vs Zombies did, it really leaves room for, instead of like 6 different crazy settings, perhaps if there were like 20 or 30 that could not only be used in private games, but in specific online game modes or even in free roam missions. It would allow for endless combinations and wacky results. Another thing that has given showing us a taste of unique minigames is the Dance Floor of Obedience in Giddy Park, which is an awesome, memorable game mode that just offers an experience you can't find anywhere else in the game. Finally, let's move on to the one negative that we should just put in the bin. And I have to say, I initially came up with a few, but I realised that a lot of the issues I'd thought of have been improved on in later titles, but I wanted to try and find something specific to this game. So after much thought, I decided the one negative is the difficulty curve. And what I mean by that is, whilst the original Plants vs Zombies can be challenging, it almost takes too long for the game to become challenging. For example, I personally didn't find the first time through of adventure mode that difficult. Even the boss fight with Zomboss is pretty easy. But the issue is you may be 5 or 6 hours into the game at this point. But I think what I'm trying to get across is the idea that I think games are fun when they are a little tricky and test your skill even from the beginning. I think that's something the more recent games have also lacked in when it comes to the story modes in particular. They're almost too easy, and that can switch players off if they don't feel like they're being challenged enough. Now, admittedly, even I think I'm clutching at straws here when it comes to the negative point to the original PvZ. To be honest, there really wasn't anything majorly wrong with the game. Yes, the graphics are dated and now and all those types of things that have been fixed as more recent PvZ games came out, but this is the game that made Popcap popular, and it's still considered the best Plants vs Zombies by a lot of people. Overall, the two elements I think should be taken from the original PvZ and put into the perfect Plants vs Zombies game is the creative and fun approach to replayability, as well as the return of awesome minigames. The one negative is the difficulty curve, just making the game a bit more difficult from the start to keep the player engaged. Anyway guys, that's about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Next time we are going to be looking at Plants vs Zombies adventures. But other than that, remember to subscribe and I shall see you in the next one. Okay, thanks guys. Bye. Bye.